Imagine walking through a valley at night 50,000 years ago. The air is cold, the ground is wet, somewhere in the darkness a fire is burning. You hear voices, not animals, not wind, voices. But they are not your people. Their bodies are heavier, their faces are different, their tools look familiar but not quite the same. Their language, if they have one, is something you almost understand but not fully. They are human, just not your kind of human. Today, we live in a world with only one human species. Us, Homo sapiens. That feels normal. It feels inevitable. It feels like history was always leading here. But for most of our story, Earth was not ruled by a single kind of human. It was crowded. There were other humans in Europe, other humans in Asia, other humans on islands, other humans in caves. Some were short, some were powerful. Some were mysterious enough that we first discovered them not from a skull, but from a fragment of a DNA. And then, one by one, they disappeared. This is the story of other humans we forgot. For a long time, we imagined human evolution as a ladder. At the bottom, primitive apes. Then, slightly better apes. Then, cavemen. Then us. Clean, simple, wrong. Human evolution was not a ladder. It was more like a forest. Branches growing in different directions. Some crossing, some breaking, some surviving for a while in the strange corners of the world. And one branch, ours, eventually standing alone. But standing alone does not mean we were always superior. It may simply mean we were the last one left. Around 300 years ago, early Homo sapiens were already living in Africa. They had faces that would look surprisingly familiar to us even if their world would feel alien. But outside Africa, other humans had already been living for hundreds of thousands of years. In Europe and Western Asia lived Neanderthals. For generations, we treated them like failed versions of ourselves, brutish, dumb, half-human, a warning of what we had overcome. But the more we learn, the more that image collapses. Neanderthals were not monsters, they were survivors. They lived throughout ice ages. They hunted huge animals at close range. They made tools, controlled fire, cared for the injured, and may have created symbols, ornaments, and cave markings before Homo sapiens ever reached the parts of Europe. They were shorter than us, but stronger. Their bodies were built for cold. Wide noses, heavy brows, powerful hands, a kind of human shaped by a brutal continent. If you saw one from a distance, wrapped in animal hide, carrying a spear moving through snow, you might not think ape, you might think person. And that is what makes their disappearance so haunting. Because Neanderthals didn't vanish like dinosaurs after an asteroid. Their ending was slower, more intimate. When Homo sapiens expanded out of Africa, we did not enter an empty world. We entered their world. For thousands of years, our species and theirs overlapped. We may have watched each other from cross rivers, followed the same herds, entered the same caves, feared each other, learned from each other, and sometimes we had children together. That is not a metaphor. It is written inside living bodies. Many people alive today carry pieces of Neanderthal DNA, tiny fragments, genetic echoes, or survival of the dead inside the living. So when we say Neanderthals went extinct, that is only partially true. Their bodies disappeared, but some parts of them became us. Then there were Denisovans. For a long time, we did not even know they existed. No famous skull, no dramatic skeleton, no museum pose of a hunter staring into the ice age. Just a tiny piece of a finger bone found in the cave in Siberia. From that fragment, scientists recovered DNA, and the DNA said something astonishing. This was not a modern human, not a Neanderthal, it was another branch entirely. A ghost population. The Denisovans became one of the strangest discoveries in human history, a group of humans first known mostly through their genome. Imagine that. A whole people revealed not by their faces, but by traces they left inside other people. They lived across parts of Asia. We now have some clues from Siberia, Tibet, and beyond. At high altitude, on the Tibetan plateau, Denisovan relatives were present long before modern humans adapted to their heights. And like Neanderthals, Denisovans did not remain separate from us. Some modern populations, especially in the parts of Oceania, carry Denisovans ancestry. In other words, their forgotten humans did not just vanish. They left descendants, not as a tribe, not as a language, not as a name, but as fragments of inheritance. A breath in a thin mountain air, an immune response, a tiny part of the human body that remembers a meeting no one wrote down. But the lost human world was not only in Europe and Asia great caves. Some of the strangest humans lived on islands. On the island of Flores in Indonesia, archaeologists discovered a small-bodied human species, Homo floresiensis. But that nickname can make them feel like fantasy when they were real. Small humans living on islands, making tools, surviving in a world of giant storks, Komodo dragons, and extinct dwarf elephants. Their small size may have been shaped by island evolution. On islands, large animals can shrink, small animals can grow. Evolution experiments in isolation. Homo floresiensis remind us that human did not always mean tall, big-brained, and built like us. A human could be small, different, local, adapted to a world we can barely imagine. And they were not alone. In Philippines, another mysterious species was found, Homo luzonensis. Again, not from a complete skeleton, but from teeth and bones of the hands and feet, enough to suggest a human unlike us, living on another island with a strange mixture of ancient and modern traits. These island humans are unsettling because they break the simple story. They tell us that human evolution was not just happening in one place in one direction. It was scattered, experiments everywhere. Some in the freezing Europe, some in the mountains of Asia, some in tropical islands surrounded by ocean. And then there is Homo erectus. If Homo sapiens are the last humans, a Homo erectus may have been one of the greater survivors. They appeared long before us. They spread far. They used tools. They walked with the bodies that were in many ways already recognizably human. For an almost unimaginable stretch of time, a Homo erectus endured. Our own civilizations feel ancient when they are a few thousand years old. A Homo erectus lasted for well over 1,000,000 years. Think about that. Empires rise and fall in centuries. Languages change in generations. Cities vanish under sand. But this human species survived across geological time, and even they disappeared. On Java, some of the last known Homo erectus may have lived around 117 to 108,000 years ago. That is not yesterday, but in evolutionary terms, it is close enough to feel uncomfortable. We were not the first humans to master endurance. We were simply the ones whose endurance continued. In South Africa, Homo Naledi add another twist. They had a small brain, a strange body, and a traits that looked primitive besides ours. But their fossils are surprisingly young, possibly living at the time when early Homo sapiens already existed in Africa. That means even the continent of our origin may have held more than one kind of human at once. And some researchers have argued Homo naledi may have treated their dead in complex ways, though this remains debated. That debate matters, because the question is not only who looked like us, the question is who thought, felt, mourned, remembered, or imagined. How many forms can humanity take before we stop recognizing it? This is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Because if there were so many humans, why is there only one now? What happened to the others? The tempting answer is war. Homo sapiens arrived smarter and more violent and wiped everyone out. It is cinematic, it is simple, it may also be too simple. Extinction rarely has one cause. For Neanderthals, it may have been climate instability, small populations, low genetic diversity, competition for food, disease, absorption through interbreeding, or all of those together. For island humans, environmental changes may have devastated fragile ecosystems. On small islands, survival can depend on a delicate balance: rainfall, prey animals, volcanic activity, and isolation. For Denisovans, we do not yet know enough to tell a clean ending. And maybe that is the most honest answer. We do not know exactly why the other humans disappeared. We only know that they did. But we should be careful with the word disappeared, because some of them are still here, not walking beside us, not speaking forgotten languages, not lighting fires in the caves, but inside us. In DNA, in adaptations, in inherited fragments of ancient meetings. The story of Homo sapiens is not the story of a pure species marching alone across the earth. It is the story of contact. We met others, we mixed with others, we replaced some, we absorbed some, we survived alongside long enough that the boundary between us and them became blurry. And maybe that is why this topic feels so strange. Because it challenges the most basic myth we have about ourselves, that humanity is one thing, one shape, one mind, one destiny. But the past say otherwise. There were many ways to be human: a Neanderthal child in a cave, a Denisovan family somewhere in Asia leaving no face behind, only genetic shadows, a small Homo floresiensis group watching the island forest at the dusk, a Homo erectus hunter by a river in Java, part of a lineage older than our entire species. A Homo Naledi body deep in a South African cave. Different humans, different worlds, different endings, and then us, alone, the last human species. That loneliness is easy to mistake for greatness. But maybe it should feel more like responsibility, because we are not the peak of a ladder. We are the last branch of a tree that was once full of life. The other humans are gone, but they were not failures, they were not monsters, they were not raw drafts, they were our relatives. Some were our ancestors, some were our cousins, some were strangers who shared the planet with us for a while, then slipped out of a history before history even began. We forgot them because they left no books, no monuments, no names, but the bones remained, the caves remained, the DNA remained. And now, after 10 of thousands of years, we're finally beginning to understand what their silence has been trying to tell us. We were never alone. We were just the only ones who made it to the moment where we could look back.